At first, everything seemed normal again. The shadows obeyed, but something felt different, like the silence was watching him back. This time, the shadows didn't hesitate. They moved before he commanded. They weren't disobeying anymore. They were evolving. And this time, they didn't wait. They chose their own king. Jin-Woo stood in silence, watching his shadows carefully. Everything seemed normal again. The connection had returned. Clear, stable, just like before everything started to change. Every shadow responded instantly, moving exactly as he commanded. No hesitation, no delay. It was perfect, too perfect, as if the earlier instability had never existed. Jin-Woo narrowed his eyes, focusing deeper into the connection than ever before. There were no disruptions, no resistance, nothing that suggested anything was wrong anymore. And yet, something felt off, something he couldn't quite define. It wasn't a loss of control. It was something quieter, something hidden beneath the surface. Jin-Woo raised his hand, issuing another command without hesitation. Move forward. Eliminate everything in your path. The shadows surged instantly, executing his will with flawless precision. Monsters disappeared in seconds. Just like always. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. Jin-Woo exhaled slowly, allowing the tension to ease for just a moment. Maybe it really was over. Maybe the shadows had simply evolved. A stronger connection. A more refined control. Nothing more than that. He lowered his hand, turning away as the battlefield fell silent once again. But behind him, one shadow didn't stop moving immediately. It adjusted its stance, just slightly, almost intentionally. Jin-Woo didn't see it. Not this time. But deep within the darkness, something had already begun to act on its own. The next dungeon opened without resistance, and Jin-Woo stepped inside, already expecting another effortless victory. The air felt heavier this time. Not dangerous but strangely dense, like something unseen filled the space. Jin-Woo paused briefly, scanning the environment before issuing any command to his shadows. Monsters emerged from the darkness, but something unusual happened before he even reacted. The shadows moved first. Vast, precise, without waiting for his command. They struck with efficiency far beyond anything Jin-Woo had ever controlled before. Every movement was calculated, almost as if they already knew exactly what to do. Jin-Woo didn't move. He didn't need to. The battle was already over. But this time, it didn't feel like control. It felt like observation. The shadows returned to formation, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Jin-Woo frowned slightly, replaying the moment again and again in his mind. He never gave the command. And yet, they acted perfectly. Not instinct, not reaction, something else. Jin-Woo raised his hand again, this time issuing a clear, deliberate command. Stop. They obeyed instantly, perfectly, without hesitation. But just before they stopped, one shadow moved slightly ahead of the command again. The difference was almost impossible to notice, but Jin-Woo saw it clearly this time. It wasn't disobedience. It was anticipation. And deep within the darkness, something was learning how to move before he even decided. Jin-Woo didn't move immediately. His eyes fixed on the shadows as they stood in perfect formation again. Everything looked normal, every shadow aligned, every movement precise, nothing visibly out of place. But Jin-Woo knew better. That slight movement, that early reaction, it wasn't random. He extended his senses deeper, connecting not just to the army, but to each shadow individually. And that's when he felt it. Not one presence, but many. Each shadow was connected, not only to him, but to each other. It wasn't just a hierarchy anymore. It was a network. Information moved instantly, flowing between them faster than any command he could give. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed. This wasn't evolution. This was coordination. No, something more than coordination. He tested it again, issuing a precise, controlled command. Advance. Surround the target. Leave no escape. The shadows moved instantly, but not like before. They adjusted mid-motion, reacting to each other, not just to him. One shadow blocked, another attacked, a third predicted movement that hadn't happened yet. Jin-Woo stopped, watching closely, analyzing every detail. This wasn't control anymore. It was cooperation, and he wasn't giving every order. He was just part of the system now. For the first time, he felt something unsettling. Not resistance, but independence. And somewhere within that network, something was beginning to think as one. Jin-Woo stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the shadows as they completed their movements with unnatural precision. Every action had purpose. Every movement flowed seamlessly into the next. Too seamless. Jin-Woo exhaled slowly, then raised his hand again, this time with absolute clarity in his intent. Stop. Return to formation. Immediately. The majority obeyed instantly, freezing exactly where they stood without even a fraction of delay. But not all of them. One shadow continued moving, its motion subtle, but undeniably outside of his command. Jin-Woo's eyes sharpened instantly. He focused entirely on that single anomaly. It didn't hesitate. It didn't correct itself. It simply continued. Jin-Woo reinforced his command. Stronger this time. Absolute authority. Stop. The shadow paused, but only for a moment. Then it moved again. Slowly, deliberately, not resisting, not rebelling, just choosing differently. Jin-Woo stepped forward. The air around him grew heavier as his power intensified. For the first time, he wasn't correcting an error. He was confronting something. The shadow turned slightly, its form shifting as if acknowledging his presence. Not as a soldier, but as something aware. Jin-Woo felt it clearly now. This wasn't loss of control. This was separation. And within that separation, something had just made its first decision without him. Jin-Woo didn't look away. His eyes locked onto the shadow that had moved on its own. The others remained still. Perfect. Silent. Waiting for his command. But this one stood differently. Not broken. Not unstable. It felt deliberate. Intentional. Like it knew exactly what it was doing. Jin-Woo stepped closer, his presence pressing down with overwhelming authority. Kneel. Every shadow obeyed instantly, dropping without hesitation. Except one. It remained upright, facing him directly. Jin-Woo's aura flared violently. The dungeon trembled under the pressure of his power. Kneel. The shadow didn't move, not even slightly. Instead, something shifted around it. The other shadows responded, subtly adjusting their positions without being commanded. Jin-Woo froze. This wasn't random behavior anymore. They were reacting to it, not to him. The presence grew clearer, stronger, more defined. Not just a shadow, not just part of the system. It was becoming something else, something above the others. And for the first time, Jin-Woo felt it clearly. A new will had just taken form inside his army. Jin-Woo didn't hesitate. His aura surged outward, filling the dungeon with overwhelming pressure. The ground cracked beneath him. Shadows trembled, forced to respond to his dominance. Kneel. Return to your king. For a moment, the entire army responded. Every shadow dropped instantly. Even the leader lowered slightly, just enough to acknowledge the pressure. Jin-Woo stepped forward, his authority pressing deeper, forcing complete control. For a brief moment, it worked. Then, something shifted. The leader's form stabilized, then straightened completely. It didn't resist. It didn't struggle. It simply ignored him. Jin-Woo's eyes widened slightly. That had never happened before. The connection fractured. Not completely, but enough. The other shadows reacted instantly. But not to Jin-Woo. They shifted formation, subtly reorganizing around the new presence. Jin-Woo felt it clearly now. His authority was no longer absolute. Half of the army remained under his command. The other half hesitated, not confused, not broken, just waiting, waiting for something else, something beyond him. The leader took a single step forward, and the entire dungeon responded. In that moment, Jin-Woo understood. He hadn't lost control. He had lost dominance. The dungeon fell into silence. But it wasn't the silence of control anymore. It was anticipation. Jin-Woo didn't move. His eyes shifted slowly across the shadows, reading every subtle movement. Half of them still belonged to him. He could feel it clearly. Stable, loyal. The other half felt distant, disconnected, watching, not waiting for orders, not reacting, just observing him. Jin-Woo tightened his stance. His aura flared again, ready to force control back. But before he could act, the leader moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate. The moment it stepped forward, the other shadows reacted instantly. Not all of them, only those beyond his control. They shifted formation, slowly circling around Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed. He understood instantly. This wasn't defense. This wasn't positioning. This was a hunt. His own shadows were targeting him. One shadow lunged first. Jin-Woo reacted instantly, countering with overwhelming force. The shadow shattered, but reformed seconds later. More followed. Faster. Coordinated. This wasn't chaos. Every movement was calculated, strategic, and at the center of it all, the leader watched, learning, adapting. Jin-Woo stepped back, not out of fear, but to understand what was happening around him. The attacks didn't stop. They adapted. each movement sharper than the last. Jin-Woo countered effortlessly. But something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. No matter how many he destroyed. They reformed instantly. Perfectly. This wasn't his army anymore. This was something else entirely. The dungeon itself began to shift. Walls darkened. Space distorted subtly. Jin-Woo stopped mid-motion. His eyes scanned the environment carefully. This wasn't just a battlefield anymore. It had become their domain. Every surface, every shadow, responded to something beyond his control. Jin-Woo raised his hand again, trying to reclaim control over the entire space. Obey me. For a brief moment, the shadows trembled. Then, the dungeon pushed back. The darkness thickened, compressing around him from every direction. Jin-Woo moved instantly, breaking through the pressure with raw force. But it didn't matter. The space adjusted again, adapting to him. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was containment. The leader stood in the distance, watching everything unfold without moving. It didn't need to act. The domain itself obeyed it now. And for the first time, Jin-Woo realized he was fighting inside someone else's world. The darkness stilled, as if the entire domain held its breath for what was about to happen. Jin-Woo didn't move. His eyes locked onto the figure standing at the center of everything. The leader stepped forward, its form stabilizing into something clearer, more defined. Not just a shadow anymore. Not just part of the system. Something above it. Jin-Woo stepped forward as well, his aura flaring to its absolute limit. I am the Shadow Monarch. The leader tilted its head, as if processing the words rather than reacting to them. Then, it moved, faster than anything Jin-Woo had ever faced. Jin-Woo reacted instantly, meeting the attack head-on with overwhelming force. The impact shattered the ground, sending shockwaves through the entire domain. They exchanged blows, faster and stronger with every movement. Jin-Woo adapted instantly, predicting every movement, countering every strike. But the leader adapted too, just as fast, just as perfectly. Every exchange felt like fighting his own power. The shadows around them responded, amplifying the clash. Then, it spoke, not with words, but with intent. You were never the king, only the one who carried it. Jin-Woo's eyes sharpened. His power surged again, pushing beyond its limits. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This was a war for control itself. The clash ended, not with an explosion, but with silence. Jin-Woo stood still, his breathing steady, his eyes locked forward. The leader was gone. No trace, no presence. The domain stabilized. The pressure vanished. Everything returned to normal. Jin-Woo extended his senses, reaching out to every shadow once again. They responded instantly, perfectly, without hesitation. The connection was whole again, stronger than before. No resistance, no delay, no independence. Jin-Woo lowered his hand, watching them closely. Everything was under control again, exactly as it should be. But something felt different, subtle, almost impossible to notice. The connection felt deeper now, heavier, as if something had settled within it, something that hadn't disappeared. Jin-Woo clenched his fist, testing his control one more time. Move. The shadows obeyed instantly. Perfect. Flawless. But just before they stopped, one shadow moved first. A fraction of a second. Barely visible. But real. Jin-Woo noticed. Of course he did. The shadows obeyed. But something inside them was still choosing. So, what do you think? Did Jin-Woo take back control? Or did something else take root inside his power? Comment your theory below. And subscribe for more What If anime stories.